boil. It's essentially a big cylinder with a big flat bottom to catch all the heat, very efficient. Boil, 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 and all the water pops out as steam. Hopefully you've got some left to actually make your brew and do your washing and all that afterwards.
But it took at least half an hour for the kettle to boil.
Now, when electricity came along, kettles stayed essentially the same shape. It's a dome shape for all the water with a flat bottom to catch the heat, except that there's no fire anymore. We've got a huge flat bottom with a huge element in there that takes a lot of heating, and there's no real design solution here. There's no real need for it to be this shape. It took 40 years of using plastics for designers to realise that we can make a kettle whatever shape we wanted. And here we've got a nice slim cylinder shape with a tiny element at the bottom, which means we can heat this much water, this much, or indeed the whole thing. It really is a good design solution. Clocks give us automation. And if you stick a kettle and a clock together, you get a nice automated servant replacement, which is this British Teasmade. And it had to be British, didn't it, really? At a certain time, the time you set, the water is siphoned from this traditional kettle into the teapot here. And as the weight is reduced on the machine, it tilts the whole Heath Robinson contraption forwards and sets the alarm off and wakes you up. Light comes on and bing, nice cup of tea.
The Teasmade was invented in the 30s. By the 50s, its appearance had become sleek and purpose-built. But to me, there's something wonderfully appealing about the older model. It wears its heart on its spout.
Looks like the old model is winning the race so far. Way, and there we go. So we better turn that off. That's great. And if you're not too alarmed, I bet you could really enjoy a nice cup of tea first thing in the morning.
Actually, I'm a coffee man myself.
Welcome to the 21st century. We don't really need the kettle anymore. As a designer, I reckon this is the most efficient way, and best way perhaps, of making a great brew. Hey, but that's my personal opinion.
Sometimes revolutionary design just sneaks up on you. Remote controls are nothing new. But when they govern everything from lighting to heating, entertainment and cooking, we're talking about a revolution in the home.
These days, our total environment can be controlled by a touch of our fingertip. And in an ultra-modern, fantastic apartment like this, those fingertip controls can be on your mobile phone. But I remember when phones were phones for speaking to people. Let's speak to someone.
The earliest phones were a completely different design from today, with their own way of making a call.
A bit like this 1880s model here, which is this shape, because the dial mechanism, the clockwork, hadn't been invented, the exchanges hadn't been invented. And we simply got in touch with the operator, a human being, a person, by pressing this button here.
Hello, this is Brit.
Because the exchange in those days was operated by people, but this left them vulnerable to skullduggery.
Go ahead, caller.
In the 1890s, Almond Strowger, an undertaker in Kansas, found work getting scarce. His rival across town, however, was doing fine, and his wife worked at the telephone exchange. Strowger suspected she was referring all calls to her husband's business. Mr. Strowger set to work to even the score, and the automatic telephone exchange was born. They still bear his name to this day.
We simply must get to the bottom of this telephone business. Calling is a better word. Since exchange is no robbery, let's have a peep at the amazing apparatus behind the scenes, and so get an idea of what happens when we dial.
You put your finger in, once you let go, the actual equipment starts to step. So that takes us our first digit.
I noticed that went back at a fairly regular speed, and when I was a kid, I always remember trying to push it back a bit faster.
Absolutely.
You can't do that.
You can do it, but if you force the dial back, you then have the capacity for getting wrong numbers because the mechanical switch can't work at faster speeds.
This is the phone we all know and love. And I remember when we used to have to rent these from the old GPO. And not only that, if you wanted a colour other than black, you used to have to pay extra. But it's really very, very old technology. And if you take the top off and look inside, we can see that the gubbins that actually makes the connection is simply clockwork.
The telephone is a design classic. This shape first appeared as long ago as the 20s and lasted until the 80s. With a cast iron monopoly, the post office just didn't need to think about changing it. But designers, on the other hand, never let things lie. The 60s trim phone and the Ericaphone reminded us that change is always just around the corner. It arrived in the shape of the mobile, though in the 80s that shape was frankly a handful.
Hello? Hello? I'm taking this call on the Brit. And it's called the Brit because it's really heavy.
In fact, it weighed 7 kilos. That's more than 50 mobiles weigh today.
And it's hard to believe that this was the height of mobile technology, right up until the early 1990s.
But it was a revolution waiting to happen. By 1999, one mobile was being sold every 4 seconds. Machines have taken the strain out of every aspect of life, so it was inevitable that gardening would get the mechanised treatment. In 1830, Edwin Budding was working in a mill, watching a machine cut the nap off cotton.
Which was the inspiration for this, the lawnmower, which cuts grass in exactly the same way as the machine cut nap off cotton in the mill.
The lawnmower was a revolutionary leap by Budding, especially when you consider what came before it.
Before the lawnmower, this is how they used to cut the grass, with scythes. And you had to be fully grown to use the scythe because these things were a precision tool. You had to fit exactly your height and stance. And people used to adjust things by putting little wedges under the shoes so that they would be the right height for the particular tool they were using. It's ingenious and simple.
Lawns had always been a status symbol for the landed gentry, who would have to employ armies of men with scythes to keep the grass in order.
Now we've got a bigger mower here, and obviously it takes a bit more manoeuvring, so we need a bit of motive power. And we've got our own motive power with our very own horsepower. It's the same principle, but I'm doing half as much work. There's a tiny disadvantage with our horsepower in that the horse tends to leave horseshoe-shaped indentations in our freshly mown lawn. So an ingenious method was invented to spread the load of the horse across the grass. And that's those little booties here. Let's see if they work. Come on, Dan. Come on. Up, up. And they just pop on like a little slipper. There we are. Fabulous fit, sir. Marvellous.
Horse-drawn was soon replaced by horsepower as the lawnmower evolved. But the design of these machines was still basically the same as Budding's lawnmower 150 years before.
The next leap in design came from this, the hovercraft.
It was a revolutionary moment. Watching the first hovercraft in the early 60s, Swedish inventor Carl Dahlman became obsessed with the idea of making a lawnmower without wheels. But invention is never easy, and perhaps the best way to show you that is for me to have a go at replicating his original prototype, which used a 2-stroke engine and a dustbin lid.
This is an outboard motor from a boat, but it's the same vintage, it's 1960, something like that. What we've got to do is get rid of the nautical bit, take the engine here, right off the bottom part, and make our own prototype fly mower.
The first thing I've got to do is to get at the engine.
Oh, it's moving. It's moving. Somebody's moved. And let's just turn this round and have a look at it. So somehow we've got to put on here a fan or cutting blades to simulate the action of a fly mower. Now this is where the invention begins. This is the standard engine, but what we need to do is make a base plate to fix this to our prototype.
I've got the latest technology to help me. Carl Dahlman spent months refining his ideas.
Let's see if that fits. Now what we've done here, rather than use a dustbin lid as the original Inventor used, we've taken an oil drum and cut the bottom off and turned it into what we hope is the original air cushion shape. Now hopefully all these holes will be in the right place, but there's one surefire way to find out is to just pop a couple of bolts through. We just add our garnish of metal plate to hold the fan in place. Hopefully it's quite a tight fit, and just top off with these little delicate nuts. Right, well let's see if it looks something like a fly mower and not just an oil drum with an old engine on top. Right, I think that well, it looks the business. All we have to do is test it and see if it actually works.
I've used a car fan instead of cutting blades for safety, but I'm still not taking any chances.
Now this beast we have here is caged so we can test it safely under the proper laboratory conditions here at Bolton Institute. No guarantees, but let's see if it starts.
Well, no one said invention was easy.
Give it a shake. I don't know if it's doing anything, it just makes me feel better. Hey, we have liftoff! Yes, power. Well, it's a bit intermittent, but it is a prototype. And I can see from the fumes that it is lifted a little bit, and we have got some movement, but not much. Mostly vibrating.
It's a great feeling seeing it running, but I tell you what, I'm not doing this every week.
Look at all this smoke. Who could mow lawn with all this smoke?
Nonetheless, Dahlman's idea was picked up for manufacture immediately.
This is the production model. The motor's in the middle here, pulling the air down and creating the air cushion just like the hovercraft. And underneath, the same motor turns around the rotary cutting blades, so you've got a rotary action. It really is a nice, simple, efficient piece of design.
The Flymo became orange in the 70s after market research found it to be the most appealing colour.
These days, the Flymo concept is just so familiar, but the original 60s model was so radical that people had to demonstrate this door to door before people could realise how easy this is. I mean, it's just so easy, it's like hoovering my carpet, really.
But the pinnacle of design for those who want to take a load off these days is lurking in your garage.
When it comes to modern state-of-the-art status symbols, it doesn't come much better than this.
Lose you, and I don't know where I am.